most tests are kind of like, set up some conditions, then call a function, check that it does the right thing. And maybe, the setup's slightly different for every test, but maybe they all need something, they all need an FTP server, maybe, So if you want to do a bunch of setup one time before any test runs, and just once, you can use TestMain to do that.
Okay.
So that's one application of it. Also, if you want to specify some different or special test behavior, like, skipping slow tests or updating test data on disk, something like that, you could supply command line flags to go test, and the way to read those would be to write a test main.
Okay.
Just look at your flags in the normal way. Let's have a look and see what they actually do here. We can just sort of, this testing.M is clearly just the equivalent of testing.T, isn't it?
Yeah.
But for main. Okay. Let's start at the top then.
Okay. So let's see. It looks like they're loading up this variable here.
Yeah, so I should say for our audio listeners, of whom we have some, we're in ftpd_test.go in the ftpd subfolder, and we're looking at the test main function. So we're starting at line 242, where we're constructing some variable log file path, isn't it?
Yep.
What's happening here?
Looks like it's trying to put a path together. It's joining a couple of pieces of data here. So the config directory variable, as well as this literal over here.
Yeah. Again, for those with audio, we call filepath.Join. We give it some variable config here, and string sFTP go ftpd test.log, and then, as you say, that will construct some path, and we assign that to log file path. Fine. What's next?
Then looks like we're instantiating a new variable, banner file, and setting it to a string, banner_file.
Yeah.
And on the line below that, another variable, banner file, and we're setting that to the file path with join, config directory, and a banner file name. So looks like it's using the variable from above.
Right. So what is filepath.Join anyway? What's that about? Do we know?
Well, it looks like it'll join any number of path elements into a single path. So it's sort of putting together a file path for use by the application.
Yeah, the point being that we could just say slash, couldn't we? We could just append, like, we could start with the directory path, append a slash, and then the name of the log file or whatever, but that wouldn't work on Windows, which for some reason uses a different path separator. It's an interesting choice, but there it is. I suppose it's too late for them to change it now. I can email them about it, but I'm not hopeful. So we have this filepath.Join, which is sort of, it's a nod towards portability across platforms, isn't it?
Yep.
It's saying, my code almost certainly will not work on Windows anyway, but it won't be because of the path separator. It'll be for 178 other reasons, but never mind.
Right.
So this is fine. So log file path, we know from the name of that log file that it's, this sounds like it's the log file for the server itself, doesn't it? Or maybe just for the test.
Yeah.
It would make sense for the FTP server to have a log, wouldn't it?
Yep.
And we might even want to test some stuff about it. Or maybe we just need to tell it where to write its log file. Or that's something we can configure. What's config here? Where does that come from? Because that's not a local variable, is it? Is that a package level variable? Oh yeah, it's initialized to dot dot, which would be in the root of the repo, isn't it?
Yes.
So config.dir implies there's going to be some config there, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's a config file or something like that, or maybe if there were one, that's where it would be, but maybe there is or isn't. Okay, let's go back to where it's used.
Okay.
This is the kind of thought process that we're often applying, isn't it, when we're reading other people's code, or even our own code that we just wrote a week or two ago, and now we don't remember what it does. We're sort of trying to work out, we're in a place of incomplete information, and we're trying to work out what guesswork and common sense can we apply to guess about what might be happening. We don't want to trip over every line and sort of get stuck and say, we can't proceed until we fully understand this, because we'll probably never fully understand any of it. It's sort of trying to work out what's the sweet spot, isn't it, between making progress through the code and having a vague idea about what's going on.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't know if you do this a lot, if you read code for fun, or it's a strange sense of fun, I guess, but I do find it fun depending on the project, but it's a good learning tool, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely been reading a lot more of people's code in different areas, so it's definitely been something I do a lot of now.
It's a great source of ideas. I mean, I'm always coming across stuff I think, oh, that's a nice trick, or I don't, if it's something I don't understand, if I put a little bit more effort into understanding it, I might think, yeah, that's something I could use. Or more often, I just think, well, I wouldn't do this,
Right.
that's valuable too, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Knowing how not to do it is
Mm-hmm.
very important.
Yes.
So fine, let's continue from line 245 then.
Okay. So 245, it looks like it's initiating the logger here.
Yeah, what does it actually say first of all, and then we'll try and interpret it.
Okay, it says logger.init logger.
Yeah, so there's some variable logger,
Mm-hmm.
or is that a package?
Like it's a package.
It's a package, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's not the standard library log package. That's some package logger, which is part of this project, isn't it?
Yes.
So fine, and it has some function init logger apparently, and we're calling it, and we pass it a bunch of stuff. What are we passing it?
It looks like we're passing a log file path, which is a string.
Yeah, that's the one we constructed earlier, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then the numbers 5, 1, 28, and the value false. And if we didn't have the benefit of an IDE to tell us what is the function signature and the name of those parameters, we'd be a bit at a loss to know what those values represent, wouldn't we?
Yep.
This is why it sort of annoys me when I have to write some function which takes, 3 ints and a bool.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the site of the function call, nobody has any idea what those numbers and values mean.
Right.
It's very awkward, isn't it? We would love to have named arguments in Go so that you could say log max size equals 5, log max backups equals 1, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
that would help a lot, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Tragically, we don't have that. It's one of the 1 million reasons Go will never be successful, because it's missing that feature. But we can do our best, and we can use things like functional options to improve that stuff. Or quite often we might define some struct type, isn't it?
Yes.
You could imagine some sort of logger config struct here with a field, log file path, log max size. And then we could pass a struct literal to it, and the field names would be the equivalent of naming the arguments, wouldn't they?
Yep.
But they haven't done that. So we're just passing a bunch of this stuff and a debug level. So what can we guess about this? We don't know how their logger works, but logging is logging, so we can sort of ballpark this, can't we? We can say, Well, the log file path is going to be, it's something in config.dir, isn't it? Oh yeah, so it's going to write into the root of the repo this test log file, and we hope it will remove it afterwards, because tests should be idempotent, shouldn't they? They should clean up after themselves.
Yep.
If you create a file, you ought to take care of removing it, and we'll see if they do or not. So we're presumably going to be testing some stuff about this logging. That would make sense. Otherwise we wouldn't bother doing it, would we? We would just construct some dummy logger that just discards all the log messages. Let's find out. Okay, this looks interesting. So line 246, here we go. Here's something.
So line 246, we have an error variable, and we're setting it to os.WriteFile.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taking a banner file, which we had set up earlier, banner file variable.
Yeah.
And then it's taking a slice of bytes, and they're passing in a string, sFTP go test ready /n simple banner line /n.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing it's taking is an os.ModePerm.
Okay. So there's an os.write file, apparently. Have you ever used this before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I haven't either. but I'm prepared to guess that it writes some file. That would make sense. I mean, we can guess that it takes the path of the file to write to, and a slice of byte representing the data. And here we do an explicit type conversion. We have a string, because it's convenient to write a string in code, and we convert it to slice of byte, and then pass it. And then what's this os.ModePerm? Something, it sounds like the mode of the file and the permissions in one go sort of thing, isn't it? So yeah, this is something to do with what permissions the file's going to end up having, isn't it? So the name banner file sort of gives this away, doesn't it? As well as the message, this sounds like the banner that you would see when you connect to this FTP server as a client, doesn't it?
Yep.
It's like, congratulations on choosing sFTP Go, what would you like, kind of thing. So that's interesting. So, we're creating this banner file, and presumably we'll then tell the sFTP server to use that banner file to display that banner when people connect. Why do you think they construct the file with write file rather than just putting that text file on disk, for example? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you did.
No.
Okay, we'll leave that then.
Yeah.
It certainly would have been easier, wouldn't it, to just reference an existing text file, but maybe there may well be a reason for this.
Yeah.
And apparently write file returns some error. That makes sense, doesn't it? There could be one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So it looks like then we test the error. If error not equal to nil.
Yeah, another reason why Go won't catch on.
And then it says logger.error to console, and the string error creating banner file %v and the error.
Great. Yeah, very well read. So we can guess what that's about, can't we?
Yeah. Looks
Fine.
like, yeah.
Yeah, we're making progress. What's next?
Okay. Next, looks like we're setting up some environmental variables with the os.Setenv.
Yeah.
And it's creating a sFTP go _common _upload _mode and setting it to the value 2.
Yeah. Whatever
And
that
there's
means.
another, yep. And then there's another os.Setenv. And this one is sFTP go data provider create default admin
Yeah,
and
well,
setting that to 1.
these environment variables are intense, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like, apparently these are environment variables that the server understands.
Correct.
This really feels like it should have been some config file, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't
Yeah.
want to have to create environment variables like this, but
Yes.
apparently you can. So we're probably more familiar with os.Getenv if we've used environment variables at all, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in Go programs, we're usually interested in saying, is there some variable set, and if so, what is it? We usually don't set any environment variables, the reason being who would look at them? Only us, right? And we already
Yeah.
have that variable, so no need to set it in the environment unless you're starting some sub-process or something like that. We could do that. And clearly that's what we are going to do. We must, in order to test a server, we must be able to run it concurrently, mustn't we?
Yes.
It's like start the server, run in background, then connect to it and do stuff. Fine. Okay, what's next?
So next we are setting the ERR variable to config.loadConfig. And let's see.
Yeah, that's another project local package, isn't it?
Yep. Load config is taking a couple of parameters, config dir that I believe we set up earlier, and also a empty string.
Right. So according to that dot comment, the reason for not just passing a file path directly is to say, well, actually, it could be in multiple places. So I guess it has a list of well-known locations that it's going to look for a file with that name, including, or additionally, whatever config dir is. So that makes sense. And again, there can be some error from that, and we'll log it and bail out if there is one. Fine. What's next?
Then we're setting up provider conf variable, and we're setting that to config.getProviderConf.
Yeah, so much configuring.
Yes.
Like, always with the configuring. Stop configuring, just start. You know. And, I mean, configuration is the bane of all programmers, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And sysadmins.
Yep. And, you know, we were talking about this the other day and saying, you know, is it better to, how should you provide config? Is it better to have sort of YAML files or JSON files or TOML files? Definitely not TOML files. Or environment variables or command line flags. Or, you know, so many different ways to get information into your program, isn't it? I mean, standard in is another one. And my way of thinking about it is, one of the things I really like about Go is you just get some binary at the end, you know, literally one file that you can deploy to wherever you need it to be, or maybe one container image or something, but one file is great. If now you have to have a config.yaml that goes with it, you know, you just doubled the load on the sysadmin who's got to deploy that, haven't you?
Yes.
That's really annoying. And you have to manage that file separately, and what about changes to it, and how do you version those, and so forth. And it's annoying. So, you know, the least you could do is just to take command line flags, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because whoever's deploying you is going to have to run you anyway. So they're going to have to write a command line including the name of your binary, and it's not too much trouble to just add some arguments to that. That's okay, but command line arguments are a bit limited, aren't they?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's basically just strings, and not super long strings at that. And it's also really awkward if they contain white space, new lines, quotes. You know, Unix fans represent, like, this is a pain if we need to pass this kind of stuff to programs. So very often, you know, an environment variable, same thing basically, isn't it? Just a bunch of short strings, zero structure. You can't do very much. So if you have a structured config, like you could imagine, you know, it's not just a bunch of key value pairs. It's actually different sections that control different things. Maybe instead of key value pairs, it could be key structured data pairs, that kind of thing. Now it starts to get a bit complicated, doesn't it? You want something like JSON or YAML, or well, you don't actually want those, but you're more or less forced into them.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think, YAML maybe has the advantage that it's a bit easier for humans to read and edit, depending on the human. But,
Sure.
it tends to be easier, doesn't it? Just because there's less syntax. It's
Yeah.
sort of implicit syntax with indentation and white space and so on. Whereas JSON is easier for machines to parse because it's much less fluid, isn't it? It's either valid JSON or it's not. I mean, there are some interesting edge cases there, I'm sure, but YAML is absolutely horrific. If you've ever looked into the actual formal specification of YAML, I mean, I don't think there is one. I think it's more or less like, here's a whole bunch of YAML, you try and parse it. And there are some really, really weird and obscure ways to write broken YAML that resists parsing. So if the human's writing to the machine, as they are if you're supplying config, human prefers to write YAML, but the machine hates to read it. Machine likes to read JSON, but humans hate to write it. So don't know what the right answer is there, except clearly there's a problem, isn't there?
Yeah.
And TOML is no solution at all, really, because nobody really supports it. And there are things like there's various supersets of JSON, aren't there? This is a digression, but kind of an interesting one. There's a JSON called JSON with comments or something like that, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big help, actually. Just being able to put comments makes it somewhat more human readable, though not a lot. There's also a language called Q, which is designed for infrastructure management and things like this, I understand. I don't know a ton about it yet, but I think it looks really interesting. And I think this is an extension of JSON too.